Well, now we'll go into our first session. It's my great pleasure to welcome another of our friends. He really needs very little introduction. He's a two-term European Commissioner for Research and the Environment. He co-chairs the United Nations International Resources Panel. He is the chairman of the RISE Foundation. But in this context, most importantly, he is the chairman of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Janez Potocnik, you're very welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mark. I hope you hear me well. Good morning, everybody. Dear friends, welcome to another edition of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. I'm delighted to be talking to you in Sweden and also to all those connected remotely. As you know, the Forum has this constant ambition to bring all of us together, policymakers, farmers, NGOs, industries, and academics, to see if we can find ways to break down our silos and transform our food system together. My address might sound to some not very food system and agriculture related, but believe me, it is. One of the main problems leading to the absence of taking into account different trade-offs, synergies, and potential multiple benefits, it's exactly based on the narrow optic and silo approach we tend to apply in our thinking and also policy making. In the past month, COVID-19, now war in Ukraine, and summer packed with extreme weather events have shaken the world's commodity chains. Shortages and the fears of shortages are stretching European economies. Such system shocks echo deeply. Most developed economies and the euro area are experiencing inflation at historical levels. All the governing bodies are focusing on providing stability, on addressing the energy, food, material crisis, and improving security provisions, trying to improve strategic autonomy of Europe. We must admit, they do not have an easy task. Despite all these acute challenges we are facing, now would be the worst time to call off the Green Deal, an ambitious and necessary strategic policy framework addressing the chronic challenges we face. And it would also not be a good time to question the good intentions and vision included in the Farm to Fork document. Taking painkillers to remove the acute pains will not heal chronic diseases, rather hide them and make them worse. The COVID crisis and the war in Ukraine have clearly accelerated the need to transition our food system to one that is robust, sustainable, that restores and preserves biodiversity, reduces emissions, sequesters carbon, and of course, provides affordable, nutritious food for all of us. We cannot overstate the role natural resources actually play. Natural resources provide the foundation for the goods, services, and infrastructure that make up our current economic system. Access to, use, and benefits from natural resources have been in human history always closely related to the level of the achieved well-being, but also to stability, security, conflicts, wars. Just think about access to land, water, oil and gas, minerals, precious metals, and I could continue. We can see that also because of the terrible war in Ukraine. But we know from the International Resource Panel's work that extraction and processing of materials also drives all aspects of the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. It is responsible for 50% of global climate change. It also causes over 90% of global land-related biodiversity loss and water stress, more than 80% related to biomass and economic sectors extracting and processing biomass like agriculture, forestry, and ocean activities. Natural resource industries are also behind 1/3 of global pollution. Trends are alarming. Material use, everything extracted from Earth, has tripled since 1970. during our lifetime. And without transforming change, it will double again by 2060. Current use of natural resources is linked to deep inequalities. High-income countries, where we are lucky enough to live, consume a big share of the benefits, while low-income countries are burdened with negative impacts of extraction and processing. In overusing Earth resources and by distributing the benefits unfairly, our economic model is taking far more than the planet can sustainably give. And what about Europe? We are, despite all sustainability-related efforts, still clearly overshooting planetary boundaries and living out of the safe operating space. For years, it is also known that European economy is very import-dependent and fragile when it comes to energy and materials. Everything so important for our economic success and well-being. According to Eurostat, EU dependency on energy imports did not substantially change over the last decade. During that period, the EU's net imports of energy have been greater than its primary production. In other words, more than half of the EU's gross available energy was supplied by net imports, and the dependency rate exceeded 50%. Russia being the major provider. But also, for most of the critical materials, Europe is import dependent. I remember analysis from my days in European Commission that for 54 scarce and economically important raw materials, Europe in its entirety depends 90% on the raw materials imported from outside Europe. More recent data are showing that of the 30 raw materials that EU classifies as critical, 19 are predominantly imported from China. Prices and resources in the long term are increasing. In short term, they are volatile, and share of material costs in total cost of manufacturing industry has in recent decades increased. In short, resource use and management are not only critical from environmental impact point of view, but also important for our competitiveness, also the competitiveness of the food industry and farming. We learned also that success of the energy transition depends on securing the access of increased material needs. Commission President von der Leyen was clear in the State of Union address, I'm quoting, "There are some hard facts. Without secure and sustainable access to the necessary raw materials, our ambition to become the first climate-neutral continent is at risk." While the European Commission is preparing its renewed regulatory view on critical raw materials, it would be important to avoid replacing one dependency with another. Our effort should not be only focused on securing access to critical raw materials, but it should be, in the first place, about managing all materials and all natural resources more responsibly. That includes biomass, metals, non-metallic, minerals, fossil fuels, everything extracted from Earth, as well as land and water. This is the only way to meet impact targets which we have set in climate, biodiversity, and pollution, and avoid all potentially related problems. When analyzing what would need to be done to make European Green Deal implementable in a global environment, Systemic Club of Rome and OSF in International System Change Compass identified 3 major blind spots, very much present also in the corporate sector and even in the civil society. First, lack of holistic system change approach. Leaders lack capacity or knowledge of how to translate system change visions into their concrete policies, investment structures, which ends in conflicting actions, policy logic, and hinder the real transformation. Second, lack of going to the roots of the problem, addressing the drivers and pressures. We lack focus on natural resource use as well as market signals, leading consumers and producers' behavior. Our current system does not incentivize sustainable resource use, in fact, just the opposite. The signals we receive tell us that it makes most economic sense to destroy the nature. Trees are only worth something when they become a timber. This is incredibly difficult to reverse since we have become so used to not valuing nature. We desperately need to shift economic signals to producers and consumers. Otherwise, while we call citizens to act responsibly, we are asking them to behave irrationally against all the economic behavior theory. And third, lack of demand-side focus. Policy attention also in climate efforts, it's mainly given to the supply side of the economy, to the cleaning of the existing economic system. It is lacking the attention to the demand consumption side. For example, it would be quite in vain to decarbonize the production of steel, as important, of course, as that is, if it's still used to produce underutilized cars and houses, which contribute only to traffic and property market bubbles, but not to real social prosperity. All this is unfortunately more or less set aside in good times, since it is either difficult to comprehend or it's simply against existing interest and misleading contemporary economic trends. Climate COP has just finished. If sharing loss and damage, it's a major success, then we know very well that from the real goal perspective, limiting future warming, COP was a failure. One could only hope that with the recognition of responsibility and willingness to share the burden, we have created conditions to focus on real drivers, current economic system in the future. The only way to unpack climate efforts and make them effective is to simply stop ignoring the inherent wastefulness of production and consumption systems, in particular in high-income countries, and to integrate commitments limiting material and consumption footprints also in NDCs. Standards and behavioral patterns linked to current economic model were set by high-income countries, including Europe. Also, the benefits of natural resource overexploitation have mainly landed in our countries. We are thus ethically bound to show we are willing and also able to change a reality we have created and lead the essential transition at home and globally. While the responsibility for the past is clear, responsibility for the future is of course shared, but only by leading that transition, only by looking first in the mirror, we would give nobody an excuse to repeat some of the mistakes done in the past and avoid collective failure. I applaud the phenomenal amount of work that is being directed towards innovation to reduce the impact of our current system. But without full-scale system change, these innovations will not even touch the sides of what is needed to meet our climate and biodiversity targets. The problem is that humankind has never really separated economic growth from ever-rising demand for resources. As a result, we are now overstepping planetary boundaries and locking ourselves out of the safe operating space in which human societies have evolved. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who governs the country of Dubai, reportedly said, "My grandfather rode a camel. My father rode a camel. I drive a Mercedes. My son drives a Land Rover, and my grandson is going to drive a Land Rover. But my grandson is going to ride a camel." When asked why, he responded, "Hard times create strong men. Strong men creates good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men creates hard times. Bad times and all the challenges we are currently facing should be a clear and convincing lesson we should finally understand. The best and only way to avoid or at least minimize potential future crises, be it related to security, environmental sustainability, social fairness and equity, or economic success, is to systematically strengthen collective resilience, not only in bad times, but also in the first place, in good times. Farmers producing the food in more ecologically responsible way and protecting their most precious resource, fertile soil, are best prepared for the harsh weather events. during the summer, like it was this year, when the floods and droughts were almost more frequent than normal days, they were rewarded. While output of farmers was affected by many, it was less affected by those keeping their soil healthy and resilient. And they were also less in the need of otherwise well-justified public support, which should be an important message also for policymakers, where to strategically channel their public funds and support. Resilience can only be achieved through collaboration and holistic approach. We need to move from an economy exploiting humans to an economy serving humans. We need to move from an economy considering humans as external and superior to nature to an economy acknowledging that we are embedded with nature. In the next Global Resource Outlook 2024, IRP will follow the well-being logic and redefine sectors as systems. Instead of optimizing economic output, we will focus on systems that provide a societal function, human needs like nutrition, mobility, shelter, essential consumer goods, and their supporting systems such as water and energy. This will allow cross-sector innovation and shifts to a more future-fit business models. Changing our relationship with natural resources, with nature, it's ultimately an economic, security, and resilience imperative. This relationship is not stable nor balanced, and it will be resolved with either collective wisdom and effort or in a hard and painful way. The best way to minimize potential future crises, as I have mentioned, is to strengthen our collective resilience in good and also in bad times. Dear friends, finally, in the spirit of working together, I would like to take a moment to thank the wide variety of partners who came together to support the forum and join the conversation on these crucial topics. The funding partners, the European Landowners Organization, by the way, celebrating this month its 50th anniversary, so congratulations, and Syngenta, our strategic partners, the Nature Conservancy, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Cargill, WWF, and Thought for Food. Our international partner, the Chicago Council of Global Affairs. Our supporting partners, the Friends of Countryside, John Deere, PepsiCo, Nestle, Indigo, the Reef Group, Systemic, and the Rice Foundation, and now also the first tech partner, Microsoft. Yes, it is getting longer and longer list. I hope a real partnership for change. Maybe not yet for a Nobel Prize, but who knows? And of course, I would like to thank the forum's team for bringing us together today. If anyone, it is me being aware of the amount of their invested work with smile and without a single complaint. Dear friends, I wish you a fruitful conference. And since today we enter the month of December, let me be also the first wishing you a healthy and happy 2023. And of course, to see you in person in March in our main event in Brussels. Thank you for your attention.
Janez, thank you very much indeed for your comments. Just before we let you go, you said there at the end, quite rightly, we've just entered the last month of the year. When you look back at everything that has happened, COP27 going into COP15, you talked in your speech really about this interplay between environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social sustainability. How optimistic are you that we will grasp the nettle, so to speak, and take the action that we need in order to bring those three things together?
Mark, if I'm honest, I'm not too optimistic. But anyway, as I said, I think it's important that we understand that those challenges can be settled just in two ways, either with collective effort and wisdom, or in a painful way which we are already seeing also happening around us in the recent events during this summer, but also what is happening in Ukraine. So I sincerely hope that we will be bright enough, courageous enough to do the change which is needed. But from a personal point of view, I will always remain optimistic because optimists live longer and better.
Quite right. Janez, thank you again for joining us this morning. Much appreciated.